today, contrary to what we have been discussing for the last, say, 1.5 years or so, it's a highly specialized topic. It's a rare scenario when compared to what we discussed yesterday, that is multi-inflammatory MISA in adults. Even compared to that, this is pretty rare. This thrombosis with thrombocytopenia associated with vaccination. So you know that for the last 2 months we have been hearing reports about thrombosis associated with the use of adenoviral vector vaccines for in COVID-19. But then the incidence, as far as the studies go, it is somewhere between 0.6 and say 6 per 1 lakh vaccinees. In July this month, last week, WHO came out with a guideline on how to diagnose this thrombosis with thrombocytopenia, that is the TTS, following vaccination. Clear-cut definitions are there. How to approach this condition is there. How to treat the patients also has been spelled out clearly by WHO. In this setting that we have decided to incorporate this TTS guidelines into our state protocol as well. So in order to throw light into this topic, we need an expert in the field of hematology, and we could think of no one other than Dr. Hida, who is my senior, and she has also done DM hematology from JIPMER. So welcome, Dr. Hida, to throw light into the topic about TTS.
We are going to deal with the topic thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome, which was, and this term is currently used by the WHO, who has come up with the latest guideline dated July 2021. Previously, we have all read articles in NEJM, and there was a quick guideline published by the International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis on thrombosis and hemostasis, who have used the term vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia and thrombosis, or VIT. And now this is redesignated as thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome. So today we will discuss a few things about this TTS syndrome. So TTS has been reported in individuals who are vaccinated with COVID-19 non-replicant adenovirus vector-based vaccine, AstraZeneca, that is our Covishield vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 adenovirus 26 vaccine. So there are several case reports of thrombotic thrombocytopenia syndrome from all over the world, including US, European countries. So what is this TTS? TTS is defined by the presence of a thrombosis or thromboembolism. Usually, it is seen in very uncommon locations, such as cerebral veins or splanchnic veins. The second feature is marked thrombocytopenia, usually less than 50,000 following vaccination, in a patient with who has received COVID vaccination with non-replicant adenovirus vector-based vaccine. So that is the simplest definition of thrombocytopenia thrombosis syndrome in the setting of COVID vaccination. Next slide, please. Apart from this, cases of thrombosis in common locations has also been reported following vaccination with COVID vaccine, including DVT, pulmonary embolism, coronary artery thrombosis, and thrombosis in cerebral arteries. Next slide, please. So the definition of TTS is based on the combined presence of thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. And WHO has proposed 3 levels of diagnosis, that is confirmed, possible, and probable case of TTS, based upon the anatomical location of thrombosis, the severity of thrombocytopenia, and the results of lab investigation. Next slide, please. So the diagnosis of TTS includes 3 mandatory criteria, that is criteria A, B, and C. So criteria A is the patient must have received vaccination against COVID within the last 30 days. Criteria B is there is no alternative explanation for the current clinical syndrome. For example, some patient may develop heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, which has similar clinical presentation like thrombocytopenia with thrombosis. So there should not be any other alternative explanation for the current clinical situation. So there should not be any heparin exposure within the previous 100 days. And the criteria C is the combination of thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. And this has been variably described. The severity has been graded into a confirmed case, a probable case, and a possible case, depending upon the site of thrombosis, the degree of thrombocytopenia, and the laboratory findings. We will come into the details of this. So, again, each of these parameters, thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, and the lab investigations, has been divided into major criteria and minor criteria based on certain findings. So, we will see what are these major criteria and minor criteria. The first, we will take thrombosis. So, thrombosis to be considered as a major criteria, it should be a confirmed thrombus by an imaging study. So it should be an imaging like a CT venogram or MR venogram, not by a simple ultrasound. Second, it could be a surgical, like surgical thrombectomy of a surgically demonstrating a thrombus, or pathology finding following a biopsy or autopsy, consistent with thrombosis or thromboembolism, usually in an uncommon location, like cerebral veins, splanchnic veins, or multi-organ. So that is a major criteria regarding thrombosis. Now coming to the minor criteria, like confirmed diagnosis of thrombosis by imaging study, surgical or pathology, any of these modalities can be used in other locations. What we have described in the major criteria is uncommon locations like cerebral veins and splanchnic veins, all multi-organ. While in minor criteria, it will be the common locations like pulmonary arteries or veins. For example, pulmonary embolism. Second will be the limb veins, like that is DVT. Or, next slide please, coronary arteries or cerebral arteries causing a stroke or other arteries or veins. Or it could be a suggestive thrombus by supporting imaging like as ultrasonogram, or laboratory findings suggestive of thrombus like an elevated D dimer, but not definitive of thrombosis or thromboembolism in any location. So if it is a definite thing which is demonstrated by an MRV or a CT venogram in an uncommon location like cerebral or splanchnic vein, it will be a major criteria. While the other common locations, and if it is not demonstrated, if it is demonstrated by other modalities like ultrasound, it will amount to a minor criteria. So that is regarding major criteria and minor criteria regarding thrombosis. Next slide, please. Now coming to thrombocytopenia. Thrombocytopenia, major criteria, it should be will be regarded as a major criteria if the platelet count is less than 50,000. While any platelet count more than 50,000 but less than 1.5 lakh will be regarded as a minor criteria. Next slide, please. And thrombocytopenia, again, if it is confirmed by peripheral smear showing a reduced platelet, and in the smear is not showing any evidence of platelet clumping, that also will be regarded as a major criteria. While any drop in platelet count more than 50% from the baseline in a patient with thrombosis, that will be regarded as a minor criteria. So that is regarding thrombocytopenia. Next slide, please. So we have described major criteria and minor criteria for thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. Next is the laboratory criteria other than thrombocytopenia. That is what other tests we have to do apart from a complete hemogram to know the platelet count and peripheral smear. We have to demonstrate the anti-platelet factor 4 antibodies by an ELISA. So that is the major criteria. Anti-platelet factor 4 antibodies by ELISA, which is positive. If it is positive, that is a major criteria. Functional assay for the same, that is the serotonin release assay, can also be used, but it is not easily available. So what we can do is the which is highly ELISA for platelet factor 4 antibodies is highly sensitive, so we can use that. And if that is not available, we can use the minor criteria, that is D dimer doing a D-dimer which is more than 4,000 microgram per liter. So that is the laboratory criteria, major criteria and minor criteria. So we have defined the major criteria and minor criteria for thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, and laboratory studies. So based on these major and minor criteria, WHO has divided this TTS syndrome into confirmed, probable, and possible cases. Next slide, please. So level 1, that is confirmed case. You can see if all the three factors, that is thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, and lab feature is coming, is showing the major, is coming under the major criteria, or patient is having definitive thrombocytopenia less than 50,000, and you are able to demonstrate platelet factor 4 antibodies. Then it is a definite or confirmed case of TTS. Next scenario, a patient has thrombosis, but it is amounting only to the minor criteria. That is, it is not in the unusual site. It is in the common site, for example, pulmonary embolism or DVT. But patient has a platelet count less than 50,000. But you are able to demonstrate platelet factor 4 antibodies. Again, it is a confirmed case. So any combination of major and minor criteria in the thrombosis and thrombocytopenia group with demonstration of platelet factor antibodies, that is the major criteria, will regard this as a confirmed case. And if you are able to demonstrate a thrombosis as the major criteria, that is definite demonstration in a cerebral or splanchnic circulation, and platelet count is less than 50,000, but you are not able to demonstrate the platelet factor 4 antibodies, but you are able to get a D-dimer level more than 4,000. Still, it is a confirmed case. So that is the level 1, that is confirmed case. Any combination of major or minor criteria with regard to thrombosis and thrombocytopenia with demonstration of platelet factor 4 antibodies, or major criteria with regard to thrombosis and thrombocytopenia, but you are able to demonstrate only elevated D-dimer. Both these group will be confirmed cases. Now coming to what is a probable case. Probable case is a major criteria either in the thrombosis or in the thrombocytopenia group. One could be a major criteria, but in the other two, that is in the lab part, demonstration of platelet factor 4 antibody bar D-dimer. So, and the demonstration of thrombosis. So any one of these three having a major criteria, but the other two are showing minor criteria only, then it is a probable case. Now what is a possible case? Possible case means all the three group, that is thrombosis, thrombocytopenia, and the demonstration of platelet factor 4 antibody bar this D-dimer. All these are showing only the minor criteria. You are not able to demonstrate platelet factor 4 antibody, but only D-dimer is elevated. But you have a probable thrombosis demonstrated by an ultrasound, and you have a thrombocytopenia, but less than 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh, but more than 50,000. Then it is a possible case. So that is how WHO has defined confirmed case, probable case, and possible case. So that is very, the definition and classification is very clear. So there is no doubt in this situation. So next slide, please. So again, next slide again is explanatory for this. That is demonstration of a severe thrombocytopenia, then mild to moderate thrombocytopenia. I think the other one itself is enough. We can go to next slide. So, as Dr. Aravind already told, the cumulative incidence of TTS following vaccination with a non-replicant adenovirus vector-based vaccine ranges from 0.5 to 6.8 cases per 1 lakh vaccines. And the incidence differs with the type of vaccine used, age, gender of the patient, geographical distribution, all these. And this TTS syndrome is more common in females and in younger patients. Most of the patients are less than 60 years of age. Many of them are in the ranges of 30 to 50 years. Next slide, please. And most TTS cases has been reported within 3 to 30 days following vaccination with COVID vaccine. And many, this Covishield vaccine, etc., is commonly used in developing countries, middle and low income countries. So reporting from countries like in India are should be clear cut and needed at a large basis to get more data on TTS syndrome. This case, please. So, what is the incidence of cortical venous sinus thrombosis in general population? It is estimated to be around 1.2 to 2 cases per 1 lakh person year. While, as we have discussed in the previous slide, in case of TTS, it has been 0.5 to 6.8. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. So thrombotic complications are frequent in patients with COVID infection also. That we have already experienced in most of us has seen in our clinical experience during active COVID infection, and for patients who have recovered from COVID infection also, we have seen several cases of DVT, pulmonary embolism, several deaths have occurred, and also thrombosis at unusual sites like splanchnic circulation, mesenteric thrombosis. So all kind of thrombosis has been followed coronavirus infection. And also thrombocytopenia also is common. Incidence is found to be about 15%. So relative risk of having a cortical venous thrombosis in patients with COVID-19 is 14 times higher than that in general population. Next slide, please. So the next slide shows the cumulative incidence of TTS following vaccination as reported in May from various countries like US, Spain, Norway, Germany, etc. So in this, the lowest incidence was reported as 0.5 and the highest incidence was reported as 6.5. Next slide, please. So what are the main risk factors for developing TTS? So the main risk factors for developing TTS following vaccination is the vaccination using a COVID-19 adenovirus vector-based, non-replicant adenovirus vector-based vaccine and a younger age. And till now, it is not demonstrated that the traditional risk factors for thrombosis increases the risk for TTS. So this will be a common doubt because many of our population who has traditional risk factors like obesity, hormone replacement therapy, or some other myeloproliferative neoplasm or thrombophilic states, they don't have any additional risk for developing TTS. So that information is very important. So many people will come up with doubts. Many patients who have inherited thrombophilic conditions, pregnant patients, patients who are obese, having some malignancies or myeloproliferative disorders, or patients who are bedridden, smoking. So all these patients, these are all conventional risk factors for thrombosis, but they are not having any additional risk for developing thrombosis following COVID vaccine. Next slide, please. Again, chronic liver disease is the main risk factor for developing splanchnic thrombosis. But there are several other risk factors like myeloproliferative neoplasm, cancer, chemotherapy, etc. But these are also not regarded as an additional risk factor for developing TTS syndrome. Next slide, please. Next slide. So patient with COVID-19 also have a significantly increased risk for thrombotic events. We have already seen in our clinical practice. But in all these cases, these patients didn't have any markers or active or risk of active COVID infection when they developed thrombosis. Now, next slide, please. Coming to the pathophysiology of TTS syndrome. Pathophysiology of TTS syndrome is almost very similar to the pathophysiology of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. So this is mainly due to the vaccine may contain some unidentified polyanion. This polyanion can bind to platelet factor 4. So this forms a new antigen, and this can trigger the production of anti-platelet factor 4 antibodies. So this anti-platelet factor 4 antibodies can bind to platelet factor 4, the vaccine polyanion complex. So this new antigen is formed, that is the platelet factor 4 combined with the polyanion in the vaccine and platelet factor 4 antibodies. And this induces production of IgG antibodies, which are platelet stimulating. And this IgG antibodies can bind to the Fc gamma receptors of platelets. And this results in platelet activation, causing platelet aggregation, platelet release. And so all the prothrombotic factors like ADP, all these are released from the platelets. In addition to this, platelet microparticles are also released, which contains an anionic surface, which promotes assembly of the coagulation factors, leading to activation of the coagulation cascade. So that is the pathophysiology of thrombocytopenia syndrome following COVID vaccine, and this is very similar to the pathophysiology of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. So next slide, please. So the new complex formed by the platelet factor 4, then vaccine polyanion, then platelet factor 4 antibodies, causing formation of IgG antibodies, which are platelet activating, leading to platelet aggregation, thrombosis, microparticle release, and all the following events. But the exact mechanisms are still unclear. So that is the pathophysiology. Next slide, please. Now coming to the clinical presentation. So the most specific elements of TTS are the delayed onset after vaccination and the greater severity. That is, most of the patients who are vaccinated with COVID vaccine has mild symptoms like fever, headache. So these are mild, and these are of onset immediately after vaccination and later fades off. While features of TTS like headache, which may be due to a cortical venous thrombosis, are usually delayed onset, more than 3 days or more than 72 hours. So that is the crucial point. These are delayed onset, and the severity of the symptom will be more severe than the simple vaccine-induced symptoms. So the most adverse events and symptoms following immunization with COVID vaccine occurs in the first 72 hours, and they resolve spontaneously. While the TTS symptoms typically presents after 72 hours, and they are very severe and they are persistent. And usually the median time from vaccination to the symptom onset is 8 to 9 days, with a range of 1 to 37 days. Next slide, please. So TTS should be suspected in any patient who present with severe and unusual headache, abdominal pain with or without vomiting, suggestive splanchnic thrombosis, sudden onset of breathing difficulty, chest pain, suggestive of pulmonary embolism, or limb pain, suggestive of DVT, particularly in younger patients less than 60 years who are within 4 weeks following vaccination. Next slide, please. So patient with these symptoms, suggestive of clinical symptoms, should be promptly investigated with imaging modalities to demonstrate the thrombus, and also complete blood count and PET smear to rule out thrombocytopenia. Next slide, please. So what are the various syndromes? So unexplained headache. So headache with red flag signs, that is headache which is very severe, progressively worsening, resistant to symptomatic treatment, sudden onset, and strictly unilateral. Then this headache may be associated with features of raised ICT, like worsening with Valsalva manuus, and we will be able to demonstrate Kernick signs, Brodinski signs. All those sometimes may be associated. So this has to be differentiated from the mild headaches following vaccination. And typically the TTS headache start to worsen 3 to 4 days after vaccination, and they progressively become very severe. They never resolve spontaneously. And this may be associated with other abnormalities like visual disturbances, seizures, altered mental status, encephalopathy, decreased level of consciousness, focal neurological deficit, nausea with or without vomiting. So that is classical presentation of CVT. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now coming to splanchnic veins, patient can present with abdominal pain, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, back pain, or GI bleeding following vaccination. And these patients may later develop features of portal hypertension, ascites, hepatomegaly, or jaundice due to thrombosis anywhere in the splanchnic circulation. It can be a splenic vein thrombus, portal vein thrombus, or a hepatic vein thrombus, or a mesenteric vein thrombus. So these are the two unusual sites. Then it can be a DVT. evidenced by the unilateral lip swelling or painful limb swelling, redness, distended veins, and you may be able to demonstrate signs of DVT. Or it can be a presentation with a pulmonary embolism, like dyspnea, chest pain, hemoptysis, syncope, and all that. Next slide, please. Or it can be a thrombus in the myocardial arteries causing coronary artery disease, or in the cerebral arteries causing a CVA-like presentation. Then thrombocytopenia usually is severe and may be associated with skin bleeds. Next slide, please. So, individuals who present with thrombosis within 4 weeks of vaccination should be evaluated with a complete blood count peripheral smear for thrombocytopenia. We should do a D-dimer, and we should send an ELISA for antiplatelet factor for antibodies to classify the patient into confirmed, probable, or possible case. So ELISA should be used to detect antiplatelet factor for antibodies because the rapid immunoassays are not as sensitive. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the presence of antiplatelet for antibodies in a patient with thrombotic event and thrombocytopenia following COVID vaccine is highly suggestive of TTS or almost confirmed. Next slide, please. The other biomarkers which can be helpful in the laboratory diagnosis of TTS includes D-dimer, fibrinogen, and blood smear to confirm that the reduced platelets are actually due to thrombocytopenia and not due to any other features like platelet clumping. Next slide, please. So the same feature can occur in HIT, heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, but that itself has been defined in the initial part. That is, criteria B is patient should not have any other alternative explanation like receiving heparin. And we sometimes patients with the DIC due to any other cause. Even COVID infection itself can lead to a DIC-like phenomenon. So again, patient will have thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. But you will get a markedly prolonged PT and APT. And other symptoms like TTP can present with thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. But here, in this, in case of TTP or thrombotic thrombocytopenia syndrome, you will be able to demonstrate histiocytes in the peripheral smear, and PT-APT will be normal. So likewise, we can and antiplatelet factor 4 antibodies are demonstrated only in TTS, not in any of the other situations. So these are some of the differential diagnoses, like situations which can mimic a TTS: heparin-induced thrombocytopenia, TTP, and DIC. So and other things like HIT we already told, but in HIT you will be able to demonstrate platelet factor 4 antibodies, but there will be history of exposure to heparin. The other syndromes like hemophagocytic syndrome, but they have definitive diagnostic criteria like fever, pancytopenia. In addition to that, patient can have low platelet count, rarely thrombotic events. Then catastrophic IPLA syndrome. All these are differential diagnosis of TTS. Now, next slide, please. Coming to the imaging. Suitable imaging test should be done if we suspect TTS as soon as possible, especially in those patients who present with thrombocytopenia within 30 days of post-vaccination. But we usually evaluate only patients who present with a symptom suggestive of thrombotic event also. So specific diagnostic methods consistent with confirmed thrombosis or thromboembolism. This is USG Doppler for the DVT, demonstration of DVT, CT, contrast CT with venogram for the demonstration of corticovenous thrombosis, or MRV with MRI brain with MR venogram. Then echo for the demonstration, echo or VT scan, which you are not doing these days. Definitive demonstration of the pulmonary embolism by CTP. So these are the confirming diagnostic methods. Then procedure consistent with the presence of a thrombus, surgical thrombectomy, or a biopsy demonstrating thrombus during autopsy. So these are all coming under the confirmatory diagnosis. While those imaging modalities which can support or suggest the demonstration of a thrombus, but not confirmatory, like chest X-ray, echocardiogram, CT without contrast, and elevated D-dimer. So if we are able to do only these investigation, then our case will come under only the possible or probable category. So then cortical venous sinus thrombosis. What are the definitive signs in the CT venogram? I think we need not discuss all this in detail, but just to summarize, it can be a hyperdense vein or the cord sign, or it can be a venous infarct, parenchymal hypodensity in the non-arterial territory, that is typically in the parasagittal distribution. Then signs of brain edema, then signs of papillary edema. All these are suggestive of a CVT. So we can use a that we have already told, MRV or CT venogram. Then splanchnic thrombosis. In Doppler ultrasound, demonstration of an echogenic material or absence of signal in the color Doppler consistent with thrombosis. Or supportive evidence like ultrasound showing a hepatomegaly. Then contrastivity of the abdomen showing filling defects in the vein. Then deep vein thrombosis, as we all know, intraluminic echogenic material in the color Doppler. Or in the ultrasound showing non-compressibility of veins. So these are all suggestive imaging. Then CTPA demonstrating filling defects or a thrombus surrounded by a rim of contrast. Then echocardiographic evidence of RV dysfunction or hypokinesia of the interventricular septum. Then chest X-ray signs of pulmonary embolism, then S1Q-T3 pattern, all these are suggestive. The CTPA is confirmatory. Then demonstration of myocardial or infarction, CAD or CVA by appropriate investigations. So these are the various place scenarios that we come across. So that is the investigations. Now going to the how do we manage? So we have the appropriate clinical scenario where the patient has presented within 30 days of vaccination with a clinical picture suggestive of a thrombotic event. And we have done the imaging modalities which are available to demonstrate the thrombus, and the thrombocytopenia is also demonstrated. And we are sending the platelet factor 4 antibodies by ELISA. If it is not available, we are doing the D-dimer to suggest a thrombus. So after all this, we have to manage this case as a case of vaccine-induced or thrombotic thrombocytopenia syndrome. So all the vaccinated individuals should be actually advised to seek immediate medical attention if they develop any symptom, including persistent headache, blurred vision, shortness of breath, chest pain, leg swelling, persistent abdominal pain, or any skin bleeds. So they should be educated to all vaccine recipients, especially if they are developing this within 30 days of post-vaccination. And once they present to us, they should be investigated for thrombosis and thrombocytopenia. Next slide, please. And this management of suspected TTS, in fact, involves a multidisciplinary team. Next slide, please. And patient should be hospitalized. And reporting of these symptoms should be made easy for the vaccine recipients while through some phone calls or helplines. Next slide, please. Now, what are the do's and don'ts for patients who have developed TTS? So always we should be careful to avoid platelet transfusion unless it is a very like if the platelet transfusion is absolutely indicated, like patient has to undergo some emergency surgery and the platelet count is very low. Only in those situations we are supposed to do platelet management will be the administration of non-heparin based anticoagulants, either a thrombin inhibitor or a factor Xa inhibitor, either parenteral route or oral route. Again, consider IV immunoglobulins, IV gamma globulin, 1 gram per kg per day for 2 days, or 400 mg per kg per day for 5 days. So, the strong recommendations are always avoid the use of heparin and always avoid platelet transfusion. Next slide, please. Okay. So, platelet transfusion should also be avoided for all situations other than emergency situation where a surgery has to be done with platelet cover. And the treatment is IVIG. Previously, in the ISHT guidelines, they have used steroids for improving platelet count. And patients who are not improving with IVIG, they have used plasma exchange also. All these have come under the recommendations. But in WHO recommendations, it is basically IVIG and non-heparin anticoagulation for TTS, for the thrombotic event. So, and there is, next slide please. And there is no study to provide information about prophylaxis, whether to give a prophylaxis in post-vaccine recipients. So there is no data to support use of any prophylactic anticoagulant or aspirin for vaccine recipients. So patients who had, and what is the recommendation regarding future vaccination? Patients who had TTS following this non-replicant adenovirus vector vaccine who developed TTS should not receive the second dose of this vaccine to avoid repeated exposure to the same antigen. And as we already told, there is no role for prophylactic medications to prevent TTS. Next slide, please. And heparin-based anticoagulations, including heparin, low molecular weight heparin. Next slide, please. And vitamin K antagonists are not supposed to be used in this situation. And adenovirus vector vaccine should be avoided in patients with a prior history of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia or a major venous or arterial thrombosis occurring with thrombocytopenia. Now, coming to the treatment for thrombus. It could be argatroban IV.
I think next slide.
Next slide. Or bivalirudin IV or fondaparinux. Fondaparinux weight-based dosing for 5 mg in OD for less than 50 kg, then 7.5 mg or 10 mg based on the body weight. And we had to use 50% dose reduction for those patients with platelet count less than 30%. And duration of anticoagulation described is up to 3 months. Next slide, please. The other drugs which can be used are danaproid, which is also a thrombin inhibitor, which is parenterally used, or factor Xa inhibitors, which are orally used, like rivaroxaban, apixaban. So rivaroxaban can be used at a dose of 15 milligram 12th hourly for 3 weeks, followed by 20 milligram once daily. And the dose adjustment is needed for in cases of renal impairment. And platelet patient has to have a platelet count of more than 50,000 to use rivaroxaban or apixaban. Apixaban can be used at 10 milligram BD for first 1 week, followed by 5 mg BD for subsequently. Again, both of these needs dose adjustment in renal failure. Or dabigatran per oral can be used, and dose can be adjusted based on GFR. So these are the drugs recommended for the treatment for the thrombotic part, and IVIG is the general recommendation. So these are the WHO guidelines for the management of thrombotic thrombocytopenia syndrome. Thank you.
Okay, madam. Actually, my doubt is that we are seeing in COVID ICUs, those who are very, very critically ill COVID patients, we are seeing many patients with thrombocytopenia. And I would like you to please elaborate on the various DDs of thrombocytopenia in such COVID critically ill patients and the anticoagulation strategy in those patients, madam. And also, we are sometimes when low molecular weight heparin is not available, we are forced to use unfractionated heparin in these critically ill patients. So usually their D-dimer will also be elevated. But we have been seeing thrombocytopenia even less than 50,000. So we don't know whether it is due to the heparin that we use or due to the other DDs, other possible causes of thrombocytopenia in such a critically ill patient. So your opinion on this, please.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Dr. Arun. That is a very good question. Thrombocytopenia, COVID infection itself can cause thrombocytopenia in 15% cases. So that is one differential diagnosis. Second is COVID infection is definitely known to be associated with disseminated intravascular coagulation. And there are some points to differentiate between other causes of DIC and COVID-associated DIC, like thrombocytopenia in COVID-associated DIC be associated with a severely low platelet count, and PT-APTT prolongation will not be that markedly high. So there are some points. So DIC is some other second differential diagnosis. Then patient may be on several drugs. We are giving antibiotics also in all these, most of these patients, especially if they are in ICUs. So it could be a drug-induced thrombocytopenia. Anyway, in this scenario, we are not considering TTS because patient is already having a COVID infection. Then next question is, then we can think of other causes also, like any other previous comorbidities, like chronic liver disease. Any chronic liver disease, hypersplenism. So those conditions which are pre-existing may be causing the thrombocytopenia. So likewise, there are several causes. Then if apart from COVID, if the patient is having an additional sepsis, like bacterial sepsis, in addition to COVID, that can again causes thrombocytopenia, another secondary infection causing thrombocytopenia. So mostly it could be a COVID infection as such, it could be a DIC associated with COVID infection, or it could be a drug-induced thrombocytopenia, or it could be a secondary other infection causing thrombocytopenia. Then whether this is due to whether you can use heparin or low molecular weight heparin, that is the second part of the question. So usually absolute contraindication for using heparin is a platelet count less than 20,000. So above 20,000, it is not absolutely contraindicated. So if the platelet count is above 50,000, you can safely use heparin. 20 to 50,000, it is not a absolute contraindication. It is only a relative contraindication. But less than 20,000, especially in COVID setting, we are using it for a thromboprophylaxis. And it is indicated in all Cat B, Cat C patients who are admitted. We have not demonstrated a thrombus. We are using it for a prophylaxis. In that scenario, less than 20,000, always avoid. 20 to 50,000, that is a relative contraindication, we can still use. More than 50,000, it is not no problem in using heparin or low molecular weight heparin. Then both these should be avoided in situation of a heparin induced thrombocytopenia. So that is the next question, whether this patient had a pre-existing low platelet count. Pre-existing low platelet count, we have already described the DDs in a ICU patient who is admitted in a COVID patient admitted in ICU. And if such a patient who was not having thrombocytopenia, we have started heparin for thromboprophylaxis, subsequently developing thrombocytopenia, then again we will look for the 4 T's, classical of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. That is exposure within the last, usually develops within 5 to 14 days of heparin exposure. Then the patient will have some thrombotic event. It's usually associated with some form of thrombotic event. Then demonstration of the platelet factor 4 antibodies by ELISA, again in heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. And there should not be any other cause for all the other causes are ruled out. So these are the 4 T is needed for the diagnosis of heparin-induced thrombocytopenia. So applying these, we can diagnose heparin-induced thrombocytopenia also in a COVID patient. And in such patient, we should not use heparin or low molecular weight heparin. We have to proceed with the newer anticoagulants, that is a direct thrombin inhibitor or a factor 10 inhibitor like rivaroxaban, apixaban, whichever is dabigatran, whichever is available.
Because in majority of our ICUs, we may not be able to look for this 4 T's because the patient will be in NIV or in ventilator and the platelet count starts dropping and they may be on unfractionated heparin or low molecular weight heparin. I think Arun did specify that in majority of the centers in Kerala, they have access only to unfractionated heparin. So the platelet count is dropping, patient is clinically worsening on NIV, and then this platelet factor 4, we don't have access to that easily. So if they are using the surrogate marker D-dimer, majority of the critically ill patients will be having a D-dimer more than 4,000. And then looking for a thrombus may not be easy. So what happens is that they will stop heparin in most of the centers, and probably they may not be having access to fondaparinux also. So actually, I think he had some doubt with regard to that also. Means should we continue heparin,
okay.
and that's
Actually diagnosis of HIT is always controversial. So to demonstrate which is due to HIT, we have to this temporal association with heparin exposure. That has to be, if we have all these practical difficulties, as Dr. Arvind told, in such scenario, what we can do is, one, the definite temporal association with heparin exposure, 5 to 14 days after heparin exposure. And second thing, we should rule out all other causes of thrombocytopenia, like some drugs like vancomycin or some other antibiotics which we are currently using. We can try to stop all those. We can send a peripheral smear or PT-APDT to rule out the DIC as a cause of thrombocytopenia. Then platelet factor 4 antibody demonstration, like some labs like Lalpath is doing in platelet factor 4 antibodies. So in such situation, if in doubt, we can always stop heparin, and practically we can do these things.
exactly. Actually, at the ground level, it is going to be a bit difficult. But then, madam, if we do have access to fondaparinux, can we think about switching over? If
Yes,
there is a doubt
that
about
is,
it.
yes, that is quite good, because it will not, it will be a treatment for suspected HIT, and it will provide an anticoagulation also. So we can do a switchover.
How long do we have to continue thrombolytics? He hasn't, when the person hasn't specified whether it is related to TTS or whether COVID related.
TTS related, we have to continue for 3 months. All these are situational thrombosis. So we have to continue for 3 months. This anticoagulation.
Is there any higher incidence in pregnant patients? That is another question.
Regarding TTS.
Yes, I assumes.
Yeah, no, there is no higher incidence in pregnant patients. The routine risk factors for thrombosis are not adding to the risk for TTS. So there is no higher incidence. Pathophysiology is similar to HIT. I think that is a question, I suppose. Yes, pathophysiology is almost very similar to HIT. It's mediated by the platelet factor 4 antibodies.
Yes, Dr. Ullas Satyababu has commented saying that. DDs for thrombocytopenia in COVID critically ill patient and anticoagulation strategy in such patients, please. I think Madam already went through that.
In Dr. Arun's question. Dr. Arun has already asked this. So DDs for thrombocytopenia, I think we will not discuss again. It will be a repetition, like COVID infection itself, or it could be a COVID-induced DIC, or it could be a drug-induced thrombocytopenia in the ICU or whatever setting, or it could be some other infection, secondary infection in COVID causing a thrombocytopenia, or due to a pre-existing illness, like liver disease or something patient has previously, can cause thrombocytopenia. Then rare events are TTP, which have not been described with thrombocytopenia with the COVID infection till now. And anticoagulation strategies is like if patient already has a demonstrated thrombus. Demonstrated thrombus are usually seen in patients who have recovered from a COVID infection. By that time, they don't have any thrombocytopenia. So there is no problem with anticoagulation. But while admission with COVID infection, if we are giving a anticoagulation, if it is platelet count is very low, less than 20,000, most of the anticoagulation, and each of these drugs have individual recommendations. Like in patients with direct oral anticoagulation, usually needs a platelet count more than 30,000.